Today we have a deck that's never truly been an S-tier deck, but it's always been able to give S-tier decks a run for their money. And it's incredibly consistent, and the best part about it is that it's entirely Series 3. So today I'm going to be breaking down a brand new spicy take on Jane Foster Lockjaw. The great thing about a Jane Foster Lockjaw deck is that it's very interchangeable. You can change a lot of the cards, and most of the versions run incredibly well. You can build the deck to either focus on going tall, so that you put a lot of power into one lane, or it's going to go wide, where you're impacting multiple lanes, making it hard for your opponents to know exactly which lane you're competing for on the last turn of the game. Today's version aims to go wide, and so we're going to be impacting multiple lanes. We're going to be making it hard for the opponent to read exactly what our game plan is on the last turn and how much power we're going to have in any particular lane. And this version does use Leech. I know that Leech is a card that most people hate. It's a feel-bad card. However, it is a very impactful card. Ever since his nerf, Leech has dropped off dramatically. And when we think about what's really popular and what's really strong in the meta right now, we have a lot of decks that are viable. We have the Moon Zoo that has a big explosive last turn play. We have anything with Hitmonkey in it. We have the Sarah counter, the Sarah tech deck that wants to use like a Shang-Chi or an Enchantress on the last turn to be able to swing that game back in their favor. We have Death Wave, Doom Wave, so many decks that this and just the Leech being on the board will be able to disrupt and make it very hard for them to play efficiently. I removed Dracula from this version so that we can play a few lower power cards so that we have that utility and we don't have to worry about Dracula absorbing a dud at the end of the game. Okoye may not be the statistically best option for us. However, what she does provide is she allows us to make up for some of our lack of early game by providing long-term value by buffing the other cards. She's also a great option to cycle on 4 or 5 or maybe even sometimes on 6 to get a little bit of extra value in the cards that are ultimately going to be left on the board. Killmonger is huge against Nebula, Bounce, Zoo-style decks, because we have a lot of decks that right now get really greedy by bouncing a Hood back into their hand, playing it multiple times, and then they have multiple demons on the board. Killmonger can completely derail that play line. The rest of the deck and our main focus with this build is getting Lockjaw or Thor on the board to create a huge lane threat as early as turn 3. Let's go ahead and talk about a few replacements. If you don't have Magneto, Hulk can successfully smash in this deck as well. If you don't have a Dr. Doom, you can either add in a movement card like Vision, Nightcrawler, Jeff, or you can add another high power, high impact card to go tall in lanes instead of going wide. Cutting Killmonger allows you to use other 1-drops like your Nightcrawler or your Sunspot in its place. And a lot of versions will utilize America Chavez for that consistency drive to help make sure that you have either your Lockjaw or your Thor or both in your hand by turn 3. Some people like adding in M'Baku, but for me, there's no room for M'Baku. I think that he makes the archetype just a little bit worse off because he's a little bit less consistent. If you're flipping into that, it's a 1-cost 2-power card. If you have to flip it on the last turn, that really restricts what you have and the potential play lines you have, and it can get pretty clunky pretty quickly. You can add him in for a little bit of surprise factor at the end of the game, but for the most part, I feel like he's a little bit of a dud. You could add Dracula back in over Okoye to pack an extra punch and to provide that kind of threat in a lane where the opponent's not necessarily sure exactly how much power you're going to be putting there. Before jumping into any games, let's go through a turn-by-turn breakdown. And this is something that was recommended on my last video for me to try out, so let me know what you think about this section, and if you want me to take the time to do this for most of my builds and most of my spotlights. So looking at turn 1, there's not a lot that we can do. We're 99.9% of the time not going to be doing anything on turn 1. You might have Wasp in hand, but we never really want to play Wasp without a reason, such as cycling, the last turn of the game, or if we're anticipating Sandman. The only time we're going to be doing anything on this turn is if we get something like a Project Pegasus, or if we get something that gives us just that little bit of extra power to get an Okoye on the board on turn 1. Otherwise, we're going to skip our way into the next turn. For turn 2, the only additional play that we have is Okoye. Most of the time, if we have Okoye in hand on turn 2, I like to prioritize dropping it onto the board. This is going to maximize the value that she can provide, On rare occasions, I might hold it as a cycle tool with our Lockjaw, but by playing Okoye on 2, you should be able to cheat out at least 5 extra power over the course of the game in other lanes, so that you're helping compete for those lanes in the process. And then we have turn 3. This is where it can really start picking up, getting fun. We have several play lines that we might want to go with. On this turn, we want to prioritize either our Lockjaw or Thor. If we have both, we want to look at the cards that we have in hand. If we have a Wasp already in hand, then a Lockjaw and a Wasp on 3 is fantastic. You don't have a chance to potentially flip into a bad rotation, so you're not going to flip into Mjolnir because it's not in your deck yet. And so it's a great way to get a huge tempo swing early, making it really hard for your opponent to compete with how much power and presence you're going to have on the board. If we have Jane Foster, or we mainly have big cards in our hand, and the cards that we might flip into are pretty low power like Okoye, Wasp, Killmonger, or even Jubilee, then we will probably prioritize playing Thor to maximize his lane impact while we're looking for the rest of our key resources and how we want to navigate the rest of the game. And then turn 4 is where things really start getting exciting. Every single turn kind of compounds on itself, and we have so many play lines, so many options, and that's why this deck always kind of hangs in there. Because if you can navigate it well, you can play to your odds, to your statistics, to make sure that you're getting high impact plays versus potentially flipping into a Wasp or potentially flipping into a Mjolnir. So our priorities for turn 4 are generally get Lockjaw or Thor on the board. Whichever wasn't played on turn 3, if you have both, you want to have both on the board in most cases. If we have Lockjaw on the board and we don't have any good cycle tools, then a Jubilee into the Lockjaw lane if most of the resources that you have in hand are low cost already. If you have Jubilee and Wasp and Lockjaws already on the board, then feel free to drop Jubilee first and then rotate your Wasp. That's going to make sure that Jubilee is not going to instantly pull back into the Wasp and give you a really low impact card in that lane. The next priority in line on turn 4 is going to be rotating low-cost resources like Wasp, Okoye, or Killmonger to build up your Lockjaw lane. That's if you don't have Thor. If you do have Thor on the board, then you're probably going to prioritize doing a Jubilee or a Lockjaw if you don't have it on the board already. Or if you have Thor on the board and you don't really have much else, if Killmonger's not going to hit anything, then maybe sometimes you still want to curve it out to just have that power and that presence on the board. Sometimes you're also just going to want to drop Okoye on the board to give yourself that residual power from her buffing up the rest of the cards for the remainder of the game. On turns 5 and 6, this is where the finesse happens. There's so many potential lines that you can go with, and depending on what cards you have in your deck, what cards you have in your hand, what deck you anticipate the opponent's running, all of these are going to feed into how we navigate these turns. So some games we're going to prioritize playing Leech, not cycling, just playing Leech on the board. So if we identify that the opponent is playing a deck that has a big turn 6 payoff, so a Hawk, Stature, Moonzu, Sarah counter, we're going to rotate our Wasp or Mjolnir sparingly, depending on what we have left in our deck, depending on how clogged that location is. We don't want to finish capping out that location. If we have more than one space and we have Jubilee, we don't have to worry about cycling into our Jubilee to potentially accidentally cap out the location, then feel free to cycle one of your free resources. If there is a chance that it caps out that location, then we probably want to do it sparingly unless we just need to get that little burst, so if the lane is going to lock down or something similar. And so if it's going to cap out the lane and it's not going to otherwise be restricted on turn 6, feel free to hold your free resources here. You don't have to play them, you don't have to cycle them. You can use them a little bit more strategically on the last turn to really surprise your opponent with the burst that you have possible. Our next big turn 5 card is Jane Foster. This is going to help you get your 0-cost resources back into your hand to rotate again on turn 6. And there's 2 different ways that we can play Jane Foster. If we have a 0-cost already in our hand, we can rotate it and then play Jane Foster to pull it back out of our deck immediately. This is going to be great for games where you weren't able to play your Thor, as you'll have a lot of reach by being able to play Wasp 2 turns in a row to cycle. We could also play Jane Foster and then cycle our 0-cost card. I recommend doing this if you have a Wasp or Mjolnir and the other 0-cost is still in your deck. That's going to make sure that you don't potentially flip into a dud. And so you can drop Jane Foster and then rotate your Wasp to make sure that you're not going to pull into the other one. You can do the same thing with Mjolnir depending on how impactful your Thor lane is to see if you need to play it twice or not. But you could play Jane Foster and then cycle your Mjolnir. That's going to put it back into your deck, but you're going to be able to guarantee that you're not going to cycle into your Wasp, so you can more accurately decide if it's going to be worth it to rotate or where you need to position your power to set yourself up for a successful turn 6. Arrow can be played this turn if you think that you can force your opponent into capping or locking out a location, but mostly she's either just going to be a body in this deck to flip into, or she's going to be a good Galactus counter. We don't typically want to prioritize playing her on 5, but there are occasions where it comes in handy. We can play Jubilee here either into or not into the Lockjaw lane, depending on how much space we have available. If we have primarily large resources left in our deck, like Doctor Doom, Odin, Magneto, it's really great whenever you pull with Jubilee in a non-Lockjaw lane, you pull your Doctor Doom, and then you can play Odin into that lane on turn 6 to not only go wide again with your Doctor Doom, but you pull an additional card with your Jubilee, giving you a lot of impact on the board, making it very hard for the opponent to lock down any of the lanes. And then finally we have turn 6. Turn 6 is where you can really bring the game home. So let's cover the main play lines you should be thinking about. There's so many different contingencies and variables that factor into turn 6 that I won't be able to cover them all, but this will give you a good starting point to know kind of what to look for or what you should keep an eye out for. If you were able to cheat Doom onto the board, then Odin is an amazing follow-up play because you're going to be impacting all of the lanes. Mjolnir into Odin into the Doctor Doom lane is going to be even better because it will help your Thor get even bigger, and you're going to be impacting those other lanes as well. On this turn, we want to finish capping out the Lockjaw lane by either rotating one last card, or sometimes we're going to rotate one last card plus play an additional card in that lane like an Odin, since Lockjaw won't rotate more than one card. We have Magneto if we need a powerhouse finisher, or if we can pull 1 or 2, 3 or 4 cost cards out of a critical location, then Magneto is going to be our priority. Of course, Mjolnir and Wasp, you want to play those on the board, whether it's a rotation or not, you want to get them out of your hand, that way they can impact the board state overall. We want to prioritize Doctor Doom if there's a location that can't easily be played into, like Kiln, Sanctum Sanctorum, a flooded lane that you can swing back in your favor by going wide with Doctor Doom. Mjolnir plus Odin is fantastic in any lane because that's going to give you 12 power in the Thor lane, and you're going to be putting 8 power into whatever lane you play your Odin into. If you happen to hit one of your on-reveal targets, so maybe a Killmonger, maybe an Arrow, you can offer even more utility. Even sometimes a Magneto, hitting Magneto with that Odin can maybe re-trigger and regroup some of those 3 and 4 cost cards that your opponent thought they were safe with. And then Jane Foster. Sometimes if you have 1 0 cost in your hand and you have 1 0 cost still left in your deck, then you can play Jane Foster and then rotate your 0 cost card on turn 6 to ensure that you get a good cycle with your Lockjaw. You can really easily determine between a handful of cards what you're going to flip into, plus you're impacting that 8 power into another lane in the process. And then if we don't have any 0 cost cards left in our deck, we can even do a Jubilee into a non-Lockjaw lane, plus a Koye in the Lockjaw lane, or a 0 cost in the Lockjaw lane, and then a Koye somewhere else to really make sure that we pull out our heavy hitters from the deck without risk of pulling any low impact cards on this critical turn. And just kind of as an umbrella blanket reminder, this is going to be your most flexible turn. You can easily adjust your player priority depending on the type of deck that your opponent's running, what you anticipate or where you anticipate that they're going to be playing, and depending on what locations you want to fight to be able to win. And so overall, the deck has been incredible. Over a 20-game sample size, I've had a 73.7% win rate with a net cube gain of 44 cubes. That is an average of 2.32 cubes per game. And it hasn't been primarily bots. I've played a handful, but most of these have been against human players where I was able to sneak those big cube games in my favor by having that surprising amount of presence that they're not really anticipating. And so we're going to go ahead and jump over into a couple of games. I hope you guys enjoy. All right, first up we have Before. And before we forget, we're going to do it. Before we forget, how'd you like the new intro style that we had? Breaking down the turns turn by turn. Something that took quite a bit longer, but it was requested. I think it has some pretty decent value. But let me know what you guys thought of it. The first location is Baxter Building, so playing and winning that one will help us win the other ones. T-Lin is going to shuffle our cards, which is not great because we didn't have either Thor or Lockjaw. If we had one or the other, it'd be pretty solid. But unfortunately we don't. Hopefully it helps us draw back into our Thor or Lockjaw, or draw into, I guess, originally, our Thor or Lockjaw. We're going to go ahead and play a Koye. Ooh, the Lady Sif discarding Death tells me this is probably a Hela deck. We do get both Lockjaw and Thor. Since we don't have any easy rotations, I'm going to prioritize Thor. That way we have 2 chances to draw into rotation tools. It does give us a small chance that whenever we do rotate, it's not going to be great. But I think that's a risk that we're willing to take. We have an extra turn to draw into our Mjolnir as well. We will be able to take out the Sunspot with Killmonger, potentially on the last turn, depending on what we flip into here. So they snapped. They did a Black Bolt. I mean, right now, all that they have discarded is Death. We can take out the Sunspot, which is great. Getting a free rotation here is potentially big. If we rotate into, I don't know, a Doctor Doom, we can do Odin to re-trigger it. We'll get more power here and here. If we rotate into Mjolnir, that's not incredible, but we can hit it with Odin to make this lane a little bit taller. And we'll flip again as well. So let's see. The Lockjaw rotates the Wasp into Doctor Doom. Doctor Doom is fairly solid. So right now they don't have any other cards that have been discarded. So left in our deck are some... This one's going to be a little tricky. Because left in our deck are some decent resources. We have Jane Foster, we have Magneto, but it also has some really low impact, low quality flips in the Leech, the Wasp, and the Mjolnir. That's a risk that we're going to take here. We're not going to be able to swing this Lechugia lane because that Death is a little bit too big. But maybe through an Odin rotation into a Mjolnir into Doctor Doom going here, we can solidify our win in that lane, and I think that helps us make sure we win a T-lane as well. Because I think maybe Giganto in the left lane is probably the most common play that they're going to be doing, is what I would imagine. They could also do, I guess, a Shang-Chi would be a little bit wild, but... Oh, into Arrow. Arrow is huge here. Oh my gosh. We'll take it. We'll take it. We will gladly take it. Let's go ahead and we'll take the 4-cube win. What a way to start off the video. Let's jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have et al. And they have the Collector avatar. I don't think they're a bot. I don't know. I've actually been facing fewer and fewer bots today. So like during my prime time hours, it's really solid. I don't face too many bots. It's whenever I start playing late at night or off hours where I face a few more. So they ran a Nebula into Mojo World. We do draw our Thor for turn 3. We also have Killmonger to make sure that Nebula swings back in our favor. We have some really good go wide potential in our Doctor Doom. Jubilee can help make sure that we cap out the Mojo World. We're sitting pretty solid. I don't know what else they're running, but I am fairly confident in our hand just seeing what we have versus what they played. We know that we're going to be able to swing that Mojo World. At the very least, if everything plays out the same, we can swing it with a Killmonger. Never mind. I was thinking if they were both capped out, they would have 3 resources there. We would have 4. But instead, they used Storm to storm that location, which is absolutely fine. We are okay with the Storm here. So we have a couple of ways that we can play this turn. I want to do a Jubilee. If they do a Juggernaut, perfectly fine. They probably won't because of the Sanctum Sanctorum, but if they do, that's fine. We'll get the Jubilee to pull before that goes off. We may even potentially pull into Odin, which would re-trigger the Jubilee, re-trigger the Thor. We could pull into Mjolnir, which would probably be the lower roll, but it's still not the worst. A Doctor Doom would be pretty decent because that solidifies the Sanctum Sanctorum, and we will be able to kill Killmonger eventually. The Magneto is huge. We are perfectly fine with the Magneto. Even if we don't end up going with the Killmonger, we know Nebula is going to get +4 from here on out. So that's going to be an extra 8 in this lane. We already have this lane locked in. We have it won. We have Doctor Doom to go wide on the last turn. We've already snapped. We could do Lockjaw and a Wasp here. We could do a rotation. We don't necessarily want to or need to. So knowing that we have this lane pretty easily locked down, we have this lane very easily locked down, I think Leech is going to be our friend. Leech is going to make sure that they can't sneak a Jeff into that location. It's going to make sure that they can't do a Doctor Doom of their own to go into the Sanctum Sanctorum, making it a very easy last turn play of a Doctor Doom and a Wasp to lock in and send home the rest of the game. So let's see. The Angela, it's fine. The Mr. Fantastic is pretty fine as well. If we didn't have a way to go wide, it wouldn't be, but it absolutely is. They can't Jeff. The only thing we were potentially worried about would be a Professor X lock, but I think we would win the tiebreaker had they done the Professor X. All right, so we'll see if they stick it out. We're going to do the Doctor Doom and the Wasp. They probably retreat here without having any abilities on their card. It makes it really difficult for them to do their big payoff plays. And so we're going to do the Doctor Doom Wasp, and we get the retreat. A lot of times whenever I cover a Jane Foster Lockjaw deck, I get a lot of comments about not drawing Lockjaw, not being able to rotate, getting bad rotations with Lockjaw. You have a lot of high power, high impact plays. You don't always, every single game, have to go with Lockjaw. That just increases your high roll substantially. So let's go ahead and take the 2 cubes. Let's jump over in the next one. All right, next up we have Delusional, and I think they're delusional if they think that they're going to beat us. Look at this hand. This is beautiful. I do like to rotate into Dr. Doom just to get it out on the board early, but we have both Lockjaw, both Lockjaw and Thor, and we have a Koye to drop on too. We don't even need to save it as that rotation tool. And so we're going to get a lot of value from the Okoye throughout the rest of the game. They play their Sunspot, the middle location turns into Machine World. Morag is a potentially tough location to play in, but not so much whenever you can go wide with Dr. Doom, whenever you can do something like a Wasp rotation and then play like your Thor over there, a Wasp rotation and then do a Jubilee. So let's lock in the Okoye. And then the last location is, they've played 2 resources there, so we're going to hope that it's, I don't know, Bar with No Name or something that is just benefits us from them playing there early. Wakanda Embassy is not bad. That gives us quite a bit of reach, and then we do get a free rotation tool in our Wasp. So we could go Thor here. But looking at the cards we have in our deck, and no, actually looking at the cards that we have in our deck, I was gonna abdicate for doing the Lockjaw first. But we have Magneto, we have Odin, we have Arrow, we have Leech. Leech would be decent, but I don't think we need to do that. But this would give us a potential out to be able to get Thor over in that lane. If we flipped into Jubilee, that makes this really constricted. It doesn't feel great, but I'm going to do Thor into Machine World. I know that that's going to give them some resources, but I would rather do that than the Lockjaw into Wasp, or than the Wasp into playing Thor into Morag. And so let's see. We'll see if that's ultimately going to be worth it. Wait. Oh, they sent us the Okoye back, which is kind of cool. We're kind of all right with that, yeah? They can now play our Thor, which is pretty good value. We sent them a pretty powerful Thor, but I think we benefit from it more. Let's do our first Lockjaw rotation, and then from there, we can do maybe Jane Foster in Machine World. We can do maybe a Okoye into the Lockjaw lane into Killmonger in Morag just to get a little bit of power over there. That's kind of our tentative thinking right now. They could do, I mean, they could play Thor over into Wakanda. No, they do Shuri instead. Wow. That's kind of scary. But they also have to cap out the Wakanda Embassy lane to get value from it. And we're going to immediately uncap the location. Okay. I don't necessarily like the rotation here. I think we would rather play Jane Foster. We can rotate, but looking at the cards we have Jubilee. If we rotate into Jubilee, that's going to cap out this lane for us, which is not great. We also have the small chance to rotate into Wasp or Mjolnir, both of which are not great. Leech would be a pretty decent rotation. Magneto would be a pretty decent rotation, but that's 2 out of 5. And so the odds are statistically not in our favor. And so I think we're going to opt to just not. We're gonna play it a little bit safer. We are going to give them Jane Foster. We know that we gave them Thor as well. That is a massive Doc Ock, my good sir. We pull into Wasp anyways, and so the rotation is garbage anyways. Oh no. We do... oh no. Oh no. We can't win that lane now. There's no coming back from it. We could have at least rotated and had a chance to get the Leech, but now what do they do? Do they have a Destroyer doesn't do it? They could maybe Galactus over here, but that's not great. Maybe they have Shang-Chi for Machine World, but they have Initiative. I don't know. This one's rough. We know it at worst they have a Jane Foster, which is going to be at worst a 9 power play. Is 6 extra power here going to be enough? They could do... oh. Do they have a Taskmaster? What a wild build. They could have a Taskmaster, right? We're worried about the Taskmaster play. I am going to send it and hope. I was going to reverse it to beat the Taskmaster, but it's a Red Skull. And as long as we can outpower the Red Skull, we are fine. The Taskmaster would have been brutal. It looks like they may have had that somewhere in their deck, But luckily for us, they play a Red Skull. We easily outpower the Red Skull. We have the Magneto into Morag, which allows us to win that location as well. That one was a struggle. That one was a struggle, you guys, but we were able to find a way to win it. We left ourselves open to the possibility of a Taskmaster. Thankfully, they didn't have it. Let's take the 4 cubes. This is going swimmingly. This is going insanely well. Let's go ahead and take the 4 cubes. Let's jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have Lucario 202. And I don't think they're a bot. They gave me the fist bump back, which doesn't always mean. I know that some bots can emote back, but we'll see. They also have the infinite card back, which I don't think, unless they updated it, I don't think they can. Oh, I don't think they can have. Sokovia, I wasn't paying attention, but Sokovia discarded our Jane Foster, which is not fantastic. That's not what we want to see. Let's go with Okoye into Sokovia. I want to leave Baxter Building a little bit open. Ooh. Daredevil into Electro is scary. They could easily be a Galactus deck. And so I think we need to be fighting for priority here. So let's go. We get lucky and we top deck the Lockjaw. Let's go ahead and rotate our only 0-cost card. So that is our worst card in our deck right now. We have some really good ones to flip into. We have Thor, which would be solid value over the course of the game. We have Dr. Doom. We have Odin. We have Magneto. Odin wouldn't be fantastic, but would be, I guess, acceptable. Magneto is probably going to be our best bet to make sure that we win the Baxter Building location. This is tentatively rough. The Nimrod. Oof. Okay. So if it is Galactus, they would have to Galactus into Jotunheim, which is not fantastic for them. They could do it. They could also Destroyer here. Destroyer here is relatively scary. All right, let's see what they got. I'm going to use Leech into Jotunheim, just in case they do Galactus. They won't have any cards with abilities next turn. I still don't think we win that matchup, but we've already accepted the snap. They snapped as soon as they dropped the Electro. But I think this gives us the most chance for a potential comeback. I think they probably Destroyer here. If I'm being perfectly honest, this looks like the turn 6 Galactus deck that wants to run a Destroyer and multiple playlines to destroy their Nimrod, which they do. So Baxter Building is definitely not in our favor. But knowing that they can't have any cards with abilities, they can no longer destroy this Nimrod. So that becomes, I think, a little bit easier to win, maybe? I don't know. It could be Copium. A weird play, but what if we did Jubilee into the Lockjaw lane? I know I said very rarely do we do this, but we are competing for Baxter Building for a chance to win this location. If we pull into Magneto and Dr. Doom, we have a chance. We have a chance to win the entire thing now. I'm gonna risk it. This is our statistically best play, our only chance to win, because we have the ability to impact multiple lanes through the Jubilee. I don't think it's a great shot, but it is our shot. It's our shot. It's our opportunity. So the Shuri into Wolverine. We need big resources here. Oh, that's so brutal. Oh no. We had a shot there. Had they not played Shuri, Shuri wouldn't have been pulled by Magneto. We very briefly had all 3 lanes locked down because we had Baxter Building in our favor. The Wasp rotation was the bane of our existence, unfortunately. We'll take the 4-cube loss. It happens. Sometimes you're going to get bad outcomes. This was a bad matchup from the start, but we were almost able to navigate it successfully enough to still find a way to win. You know, it was going too well. I have to say, it was going too well. We needed to be knocked down a peg. We were getting a little bit too cocky. Oh, no. So one of the other things about this deck is that disruption, so like Korg, Rock Slide, Subterranea, are so detrimental to the deck. It is almost impossible to come back from. Because now the Lockjaw lane has so many chances to pull into duds. We have 4 rocks. We have the Okoye. It lessens our statistical chance of pulling into good cards by so much that it's almost impossible to win. We're still going to do it. We're going to send it. We're going to hope. That's okay. That's okay. We can handle the leech. We can handle the leech play. So now we draw into extra resources courtesy of Maximus. We have 3 of our we have 3 of the 5 rocks from our deck in our hand. So we are slowly but surely increasing the chance that we pull into a good outcome. Let's go ahead and we're going to gamble one more time. We're going to gamble that Jubilee is going to pull into Magneto, Dr. Doom, Jane Foster. Magneto. That is beautiful. We will absolutely take the Magneto play. Although it pulls a lot of resources into the Baxter building lane from the Asteroid M, it gives us a little bit better opportunity to win the Asteroid M as well. All right, let's go with, this is such a strange game. Let's go with Jane Foster. That's going to pull our Wasp out. We get 1 free rotation with the Lockjaw on the final turn, and we hope for the best. We can do that plus like an Odin, that plus an arrow. And this could be a Silver Surfer, but if they have Silver Surfer, they're going to have to play it this turn because of the leech. Ooh, we're actually not going to... Yeah, they do play the Silver Surfer this turn. We're actually not going to be able to draw because we pulled the Wasp. So maybe not the best play. We will take the 1 cube. As soon as we saw the leech come down, we probably should have played it a bit more aggressively. But we will take the 1 cube. We will absolutely take it. Even on matches where it's not necessarily in your favor, you can still do things to try to swing the statistics and the odds back in your favor. And actually, that was a short one. Let's go ahead and jump over into one more. All right, next up we have Loki. And if they didn't have the Nebula avatar, I would think they were a bot. But since they have that, I don't believe bots can have the paid avatars. So Muir Island is pretty good for our Lockjaw lane since we'll get a lot of cards there pretty quickly. And we have Lockjaw plus Wasp. I don't know what they're running, but we're going to snap. We have a pretty good early game setup. And so I can only assume that we'll be able to bring it the rest of the way home. So they skip on turn 2 as well. They could be running anything. Mirror Dimension is also good since this deck likes to go wide. Mirror Dimension is pretty solid. And now looking at the cards we have to rotate into, we have Okoye, it's okay. Killmonger, not great. Jubilee, pretty bad. We have Thor, which would be pretty good. Leech and Arrow, nothing of high value, high impact. We have all of those in hand. I guess we could flip into Arrow, which would be pretty okay. What do they play in Oscorp Tower? If this is something silly... Oh, they storm the Oscorp Tower lane. Okay. Then I was thinking if they sent us something just of good value, then it was definitely a bot. But the storm I could see happening. And then the second location is Muir Island. We actually don't have a turn 4 play, which is so sad. Let's go ahead and rotate our Wasp. We don't have any absolute duds to pull into, which thankfully. Our worst pull is probably going to be Jubilee or Okoye, and either one I think would be okay with. Thor. Thor is beautiful because that gives us another potential card that we can draw into that would be decent value. We're not going to be able to win Flooded Lane. Actually, we can. We could win it with a Magneto, right? Or at least force it into a tie. Okay, let's do Jane Foster. Next turn we could do something like Mjolnir as a flip. We could do Wasp. And then we could do Magneto. That's going to force it into a tiebreaker match because their cards are not going to have abilities on that last turn. So it's going to force it into that tiebreaker, which I think we should have no problem winning. The Maximus lets us draw into Killmonger. Ooh. Interesting. So if they... Ooh, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. If they move their Nightcrawler into the flooded lane, this becomes that becomes their lane. And I don't want to prioritize the Doctor Doom. We just don't really have a lot of space for it. I mean, I guess we could, but as is, it would lose that lane for us. We're gonna hope. Oh, they do a Magneto of their own, but it doesn't have abilities. We're only gonna pull one card out of the flooded location. Can we win the tiebreaker No, we can't. Oh, no. No, no, no. Arrow? Arrow! Arrow for the win! Oh, I had counted that game out. We had counted it as a loss in our head. I had checked off the box. I knew we had lost. We get the 1 out of 2 rotation to pull into the arrow. Oh my gosh. All right, next up we have Brew. The last game we played was phenomenal, but I think it was against a bot. But the peak actually helps us out a little bit here. It gives us the ability to do a Jubilee on turn 1 to get some early game, just card thinning possibilities. Now they have a Nebula. Ooh, the Nexus is... Nexus isn't terrible. If we draw into our Thor, we can play Thor. That's able to get tall. We can even do like a Magneto. Maybe Killmonger will be able to swing a location for us. I'm going to do a Okoye into the peak. I think the odds of us flipping into an early Doctor Doom are pretty low. And even if we do, I think we would prioritize like some taller power instead. Okay, so they're going to have... Oof. They have their Daredevil, so they'll be able to do a Daredevil read. We need to get something there. They play Jeff, so this probably is a control-heavy deck. I would expect a Storm. I would expect a Professor X. And what we're going to do is we're going to do our Thor into the Nexus, just in case they want to Professor X that lane. They're going to win it for now, and that actually allows them to win Asgard as well. Oof. Okay. I think we skip here, and then they snap on us. We can draw into our Odin, maybe? If we draw into Lockjaw, then we can always opt to rotate the Wasp and then play Mjolnir, and then our Odin. That way the Mjolnir and the Odin won't cycle. We can get a double buff in the Nexus location. We'll see. Just depends on how they play this one out. So they do a Spider-Man in the Nexus, which is scary. We could, I mean... We could Mjolnir and Doctor Doom. That's going to give us... It's going to give us 11 extra power here. That's not bad. That's definitely not bad. They can move their Jeff out and then play a card there. We can also do Mjolnir and then Magneto to pull their Jessica Jones and their Spider-Man out. But I think I would rather focus on the Doctor Doom. Doctor Doom is going to be the same power as Magneto, courtesy of the peak. I think this is our best chance. We're going to go ahead and stay in for the 4. I think we have a moderate chance to win this one. They're probably not going to storm the Nexus just because... I assume they have Storm in their deck, but I don't think they're going to storm the Nexus location because we have so much power in the other 2 lanes that it would be detrimental to them, I think, overall. They do move Jeff, and then they play 1 card into the mid, and it's Chavez. Can we outpower that? So the good thing about the Nexus is that if we have enough power in the other lanes, we can still win the location. So this is one of those cases where we lose the Nexus, but win the game. If you go tall enough in the Nexus as the opponent, then you can easily win the other locations. But if it's contested, and the opponent has been playing into the other 2 lanes and you haven't, then you get a big advantage compared to what they do. And so this one we will absolutely take. We are able to hold it down versus the lockdown list. We have had an insane run with this deck. So we're going to go ahead and end the video there. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to give it a like and a comment down below. As always, this has been TLSG. Later, guys.